Yes, I do think people did change. I mean, when the epidemic started off in Wuhan, the Chinese regime tried to suppress it. The local officials tried to hide it to begin with. When it became impossible to hide it anymore, they had to face up to the central government, and the authorities had to swiftly begin to deal with it and use their extensive powers over their population to deal with it as they thought best. But even after the central authorities had been alerted to the reality of the pandemic in Wuhan, they were slow to acknowledge it internationally. They lent on the World Health Organization not to declare an international pandemic until the central authorities were ready for that. And this all became apparent to our government and other governments. And it was a massive breakdown of trust at that point, an exposure of the duplicity of the communist regime. And then there was the refusal by that regime to allow an independent international investigation into the causes of and origins of the pandemic, which is very, very serious, because we need to understand how this pandemic happened in order to guard against future pandemics. And I think the trust, both at government level and at popular level, many countries around the world, and you can see this reflected in the result of polls taken by Pew Research, a great loss of respect and trust for the Communist Party. And that will not be restored until there is a change of political regime in China. And the same is true in our business dealings with them. The trust that has been destroyed, the mistrust that has been built, can only be restored through political revolution. And more people in the senior ranks of the Communist Party of China recognize that their own regime, their own political system, having produced internal problems and these external problems, cannot deal with them. And that if they are to preserve their own wealth and power, and if they are to hold out any hope of saving China as a nation, then they know that there has got to be a profound change of political regime. There's got to be a political revolution. When I wrote the book, or published the book, people were astonished that I should say such a thing. But there are Chinese former officials of the communist system, a professor from the Central Party School who for 15 years taught political ideology to senior Chinese officials who were being groomed for the highest offices. She taught them for 15 years. She is now living in America, a fellow of the Hoover Institution. She and others like her testify to the fact, as they see it, that a majority, 60, 70% of middle and upper officials of the Communist Party regard the system, the political system that they have, as broken and as inferior to constitutional government. Now, what exact kind of constitutional government China should have is an extremely important and open question. But they do believe that a systemic change is needed. We, in the West, or in the liberal democracies like Japan, Korea. Taiwan cannot dictate to China what kind of a system it should have to govern itself. But what we can and must do is to help those Chinese in China who want radical change to achieve it. And we have ways of doing that. But we must have that mindset which says this is possible. And we must identify the great benefits to the world which would come from a democratic China. There could be a great increase in prosperity. There could be a great renaissance of trust in the world. There could be China's contribution to art, science, as well as the economy and other aspects of human life could be so much greater and so much richer under a democratic regime. And you know, it's not just foreigners preaching this. If one reads carefully what has been published in China by economists about the economy, politicians, constitutional scholars about the need for constitutional government, etc., in field after field, there is evidence that thinking Chinese believe the sort of things I'm saying, and believe them more strongly than we do. They live with the problems. They know the problems more deeply than we can, and as they look around the world and ask themselves, what other systems are there? What are the systems that work better than the one we've got? There is only one real answer, and that is some form of elective democracy.